Welcome, everybody, to the morning meeting, whether you're watching on YouTube or here on the two-way platform, whether you're a human being or a bot, we welcome you. We're going to talk about the aftermath of yesterday's big announcement, what this means for the Democratic ticket, for the Republican ticket, and the race overall. And we're going to have a big apology to Tim and to Governor Walz because I, for one, was completely wrong yesterday. Maybe not completely wrong, but somewhat wrong about whether this would be a strong pick or not. And we'll talk all about that. The vice president and the vice presidential nominee have two rallies today in the what we like to call the Heartland. 2:20 Eastern time in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. 6:40 Eastern time in Detroit. President Trump was on Fox and Friends this morning. I listened to the whole thing, so you don't have to. And it was meandering. And we're going to talk about the Trump meander. President Biden, no public events. White House briefing scheduled for 2. J.D. Vance continues to be the bracketer in chief, having events in Michigan and Wisconsin ahead of the vice president and her tickets events, rallies. Doug Emhoff is leaving for Paris for the Olympics. Jill Biden, no public events. So I owe Governor Walz an apology, and Tim to some extent, because as Shaq says, I was not really familiar with the game. This guy last night, incredible event. And just as I said about the Republican convention, that was technically proficient, regardless of your view of the election or the candidates. Last night's event, even lots of Republicans, almost every Republican I've talked to acknowledges it was a great event. It was well staged. The remarks well written, and he was really good. If he's about biography and personality, which is what the Harris Walz tickets wants the whole election to be about, he'll be a great choice. Maybe not help her all that much, but certainly not certainly a do no harm pick. If it's a bad ideology, there's plenty to work with. So, Tim, 2 questions for you to start off. One, do you accept my apology? And 2, do you think, I know you think that he's not going to just be neutral. He's going to be better than Tim Kaine. But where do you see electorally, either demographically or geographically, where do you see his best hope to help? Is it with suburban women? Is it with younger people? Is it rural and exurban? Where do you see the best help from him?
Yeah. I'm a softie. Apology accepted, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank
you for that. Shaq and I appreciate that.
Look, I think going forward, what was so interesting about yesterday, even as a huge Walz fan, he hadn't really been on the national stage under that type of pressure cooker environment, delivered that type of speech, and I think he really did deliver. And it's really like the first one that he's done. So I think for him going forward, he passes the test of, can he get on the road, deliver a speech, be part of that team? And I think so far the answer is yes. Now, obviously, we're in day one, knowing the qualities about him that I know. I think that will only get better. But I think the unveiling, to your point, of Coach Walz is going to be very strong for the ticket. And I just like the biography framing, I think is true. His biography is very strong. I think, of course, Republicans are going to find things to go after, as they would with anyone. But I do think also it's very smart for the Harris campaign to continue to lean into this future framing, this looking forward versus not going back type of conversation, because the Republican ticket, I mean, like you said about Donald Trump's interview this morning, it's rambling. It's about him. It's about going backwards. And I think that framing works very well for Republicans. So short version, I think he's going to be great on the road.
Sean, are you a big enough man to apologize to Tim and Governor Walz, or do you see no need because you think they're going to be able to destroy the ticket for being liberal?
Oh, no. In fact, I want to thank Tim. I think we were looking for a reset on our side, and he gave it to us. If Shapiro had been the nominee, as I said yesterday, I don't know what the talking points were if Shapiro was the nominee. I mean, I'm sure we would have made them up. Governor Walz yesterday gave us an opportunity to reset the campaign, to reframe it, to double down on extreme liberalism. The talking points were clear and concise last night. I mean, it was unbelievable. I said to Tim, he was on my podcast yesterday, it was like we did a better job of framing Tim Walz when he rolled out than we did Kamala Harris. Everybody was on the same page yesterday talking about the extremism, the far left that he has on issues from transgenderism to his response to the Minnesota riots. I think this stolen valor thing is going to be, or has the potential probably to be, an issue. This is the kind of stupid thing that that takes down a politician. And I think especially a guy like him, there are several issues there. There's both the non-deployment to Iraq, then the use of the title command sergeant major. There is a problem here. I think that could play big. And his gun rating.
If he were the presidential nominee, I totally agree. But he is not. And every day you spend talking about Tim Walz's record, you're not talking about inflation and immigration and the top of the ticket. And you've got a candidate who proved on social media yesterday and Fox and Friends today that he's not on the same page as everybody else. He's not Tom Cotton. He's not J.D. Vance. He is a sprawling, rambling, grievance-filled, upset man right now.
Yeah, and the problem is that it comes back to the broader point, which is if this is the first big decision you make as Kamala Harris, and he ends up being a lot more flawed than you think, that goes back to her decision making. Look, I'll tell you is I've never seen the right as fired up in the last 15 days as it was yesterday. So you know,
just one thing very quickly on the veteran stuff. Look, there are conservative news outlets in Minnesota who tried to make that happen during his gubernatorial race. Did not work. I know Republicans will try. I'm pretty confident you guys are going to go down a rabbit hole that's not going to bear any fruit.
Tim, with all due respect, it's not a rabbit hole. The guy didn't earn the title. It's very clear in the military what it takes. I mean, look, if it's effectively used the way, and the worst thing that's going for you guys right now is you got Chris LaCivita, who's a dog with a bone when it comes to issues like this, and there's no one that knows how to weaponize something like this better than he does.
100.
See the previous movie on this, and so I'm just telling you, I think they're like, just because it didn't play in a Minnesota race and because they didn't have any money behind it and it wasn't effective doesn't mean it's not going to play now.
So there's two differences between what Chris LaCivita was able to do in 2004 and what he faces now, in my view. And to me, this is the heart of the election right now, besides the Electoral College, which is always the heart. In 2004, Chris LaCivita got the press to say, I wonder if what they're saying about John Kerry is true. I wonder if this narrative is true. Let's let the Swift Boat Veterans for Truth on broadcast television and talk all about it. He got that done. That's not going to happen here because the press is in a swooning honeymoon.
Yeah.
And they're not going to cover that story. And it's about the bottom of the ticket, not the top. That's another big difference.
And I would just,
but let me just say the third difference. Let me say the third difference. The third difference is this. John Kerry engaged in it. He engaged in it. Tim Walz and Kamala Harris are not going to engage in this because they're not engaging on anything. It's impossible for Chris to replicate what he did in 2004 unless something big occurs. It's the bottom of the ticket. The press wants to cheerlead, and they're not going to help. The Democrats are not going to help.
I will say one thing that undermines my case, which is this. It's not just that they swoon, which is, I give you that. Yesterday was pretty unbelievable. But secondly, I don't think that there's an understanding. You have fewer and fewer people who have served in the military, fewer and fewer people who understand this issue and why it matters. But to those who do, it will matter. And I will say this, in an election that comes down to thousands of people over a handful of states, that may be enough to mobilize enough people. Is this going to define the election? Absolutely not. But what I'm saying is that in key states at key times, this could make a difference.
Yeah. I will get off of this topic, but I think attacking Tim Walz on his record as a veteran in service, I just don't think it's going to work because I don't think the facts add up. I can go through, and Sean, I know you know the points here too, but he was not aware of any coming deployment on the Iraq question, and the rank that he retired as, my understanding is it goes one level down because he did not.
No, that's not true.
Not
true.
No. All right, we're not going to settle it here. This will be for a future episode. I just want to talk about the press swooning for 1 minute and the race overall, and then I want to get to everybody's questions. If you want to get in with a question, comment, as always, we want to hear who you are, where you're from, who you're supporting in the race. Please raise your hand. I see lots of hands up, but they're almost all from people who've been on the program before. Not that you can't be on more than once, but love to get more hands up. So please raise your hand. I want to read you a sentence about a story about this news organization wrote a story about how great and lovely it is that the two Democratic ticket mates are forming this buddy relationship. Ms. Harris wears broad-shouldered suits, pearls, and heels, sometimes crisp chucks. She marshals an arched brow, a studied hand flipped, carefully curated sentences. Her wave is controlled, her eyes always fixed on a distant point, her movements smooth. That is not, well, that is the New York Times. I won't say who it's not. I mean, there's never a paragraph about Donald Trump written about in the New York Times, anything like that. And I'll just say again, Sean, the Republican campaign has decided to go to war with the press. And if they continue that way, they'll just keep driving into the arms of a ticket that has to just run out the clock and make it about that kind of personality, gauzy personality for 90 days. What say you, Sean Spicer?
I agree. I mean, look, there's no question about it. I mean, the press coverage, I'm looking for a couple of the other ones. Walz has a history with China, but he's not pro-China. That's the Washington Post. The Wall Street Journal story similarly was, I mean, it was unbelievable to see all these outlets. I mean, I think the CNN called them the happy warriors. There's no question that the press is cheering. And I think I've never seen it like this in my 30 years of doing anything like this.
Well, Obama 2008.
Not to the extent anyway, but the bottom line is I don't know how you overcome that. There is a visceral dislike on both sides between people, not just in the Trump campaign, but I think on the right overall, and what's going on in the media now.
Tim, one of the things I thought was so key last night is Trump rallies no longer have a monopoly on fun, excitement, entertainment. These rallies, all this week and maybe beyond, they're now like the Trump rallies. They've crossed over from political events to cultural events. And it got to be driving Trump crazy. But do you think they can keep that going? Can Walz do that when he's on his own?
I think he can. I think he showed that he could yesterday, but I completely agree with the point. I mean, not since thinking prior to 2015, it was Obama rallies that were at least able to generate some level of energy like that. And like, look, you know, you want to talk about how the press is biased, but like that is part of the news. It's like there's a new energy there. You want to say that the press is cheering the ticket. They're reporting on the people at these rallies cheering the ticket, not to be like too gauche or ridiculous about it, but there's a new energy there. And I think that is what's carrying some of the coverage as well. So yeah, I think Walz can continue that. I think he showed it yesterday.
All right, let's bring folks in again. Please say where you're calling from, who you're supporting in the race, question or comment. Michael, we'll start with you. Come on in and tell us everything. Hold on, you got to unmute, please.
I'm from New Hampshire and I'm supporting the Democratic ticket. I mean, the one thing, I think to paint the press as just a bunch of sort of red diaper babies who are just totally in the tank is a mistake because, there's a real difference. There is somebody who did threaten democracy and there's another side. And to say, in the sort of two-sided press has been basically to Trump's benefit for a long time. And finally, they're waking up, that there's a real choice here and you have to point out the differences. And
Sean, I'll let you take that. Go.
Look, I don't think the press has never been on Donald Trump's side. They carried him. That's different from being on his side. I don't think you could find a positive story about Donald Trump since he went down the escalator. But I will agree with you on this front. This is a process foul. This is what I was saying the other day about yelling at the refs during the game. No one votes because the press sucks. No one votes because the press is biased. No one votes because Joe Biden got pushed out and Kamala Harris got put. The folks on the right that focus on the process are yelling at the refs in the middle of a game and about to get scored on. So I agree with you in the sense that it doesn't get us anything. It does make me feel a little bit better this early in the morning, but it doesn't advance the thing. And I think the more that I take my own advice and focus on policies, the better.
Yeah, Michael, thank you. Okay, unmute, please, Emily. Tell us where you're from, who you're supporting, and ask away. Or comment, whatever you want to do. Sorry, Emily, one more time, unmute there. There you go.
Hi. I'm Emily. I'm almost 40 from California, so I'm sure y'all put me in the liberal box, which is fine because I am, but I'm also a Christian, so I think that's important to note. And I struggle to understand how Tim Walz is being painted as so liberal. I mean, maybe that's because I'm liberal, but yeah, I guess I'm struggling. So that was one of the questions I wanted to ask.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sean? Okay,
It's
Tim first.
just very quickly too, like it is also surprising to a lot of people in Minnesota who consider themselves like the progressive flank of in Minnesota politics. It's very funny to see him rise and have that framing. I've seen him sort of discussed as, which maybe makes a little bit more sense to me, is like the progressives moderate. Like progressives can look at him and recognize that he is not one of them, but can accept him as a valuable addition to the ticket, which is like a good needle to thread. But
Tim, what's his most conservative issue position? I don't want to hear about his clothes or his previous occupations. What's his most conservative issue position?
I mean, I think historically it was gun ownership
Well,
and
but
gun
forget
rights.
that because last night they emphasized gun safety laws. So
Yeah.
what's his most what's his current most conservative issue position that goes against the Democratic Party, where he says to a Democratic constituency, I'm not with you, actually, I'm more to the center. Name one. Go.
Yeah. I don't think that there is one that really is gonna drive a wedge between him and the base of the party, but I don't think that makes him
Right.
super left, right? I like
Well, but it doesn't make him a moderate or a centrist. And Emily, I think that's the point is he's got a lot of issue positions that are pretty far to the left. Tim's right. He's more about a bridge building to the far left than being of the far left. But if you look at his record as governor on economics and social issues, he's done a lot of stuff that not only is far left, but is less popular than the Trump positions for a lot of Americans.
I can see.
I would just say that to Emily's point, look, there's video of him embracing saying, I'm a proud progressive. I mean, I get Tim's point. He may not have earned it fully, but when you go out there and articulate yourself and call yourself that, that's the Politico has an interesting, just a quick write-up. It says Republicans, are focusing on the attacks. The trans refuge is what they cite as one of them. Undocumented and immigrants' incentives to come to the U.S. This is in Politico this morning. Walz slow walk the National Guard. I mean, so there is a case, especially on the social issues, that he has been extremely progressive.
Sure. And I think, like paid family leave and universal school lunches. And there's some things that I'm just like, oh, but if Republicans had those, what would they be so upset about?
Yeah.
I don't think those are the issues that.
Yeah, Emily, he's got some that I would say are center left and some that are left, and some that are popular 80-20, like family leave, and some that are unpopular 20-80, like some of his positions on like driver's licenses for illegal immigrants. So, but again, I think that he's at this point, because the press in particular and a lot of the public is interested in the bio and the vibes rather than the policy. It's going to be hard for Republicans, much harder than I thought 24 hours ago, for Republicans to make a big deal of this. Emily, thank you. Emily, before you go, unmute again. How'd you find out about two-way? Sorry, you need to unmute again. I muted you accidentally.
Your Twitter account.
My Twitter account. All right. Thank you for following me on Twitter and for being here, and tell all your friends, Emily. Thank you. All right. Let's go to Jeff. Jeff, tell us all about yourself and ask or comment.
Oh, hey, good morning, Mark. Good morning, everybody. Calling from Minnesota, specifically Minneapolis, specifically.
Then you can stay for the hour, Jeff. Go ahead.
Yeah. I didn't know Tim was from here, so I'm sure one of the few things we have in common is the Golden Gophers, but it may end there.
Yes.
Tim's going to run for mayor of St. Paul someday. We hope he'll have your support.
I'll think about it.
Okay.
I guess
who are you supporting? Who are you supporting, Jeff?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So I'm a Trump voter, but let me preface it by saying back in the 2016 primary, he was my absolute last choice. I was actually a Rubio Fiorina fan, if you remember her. But he became the only vehicle to stop, what I consider the left, and so I've been a Trump voter. What I'm going to be interested.
Did you support him? Did you support him this year in the primary process?
I did.
Yeah. Okay. So you bleed MAGA red.
I don't bleed it, no, but it's the only vehicle to stop the blue.
Yeah.
I mean the deep blue. And maybe I live in a bubble. I know I do. I could go knock on 100 doors right now and not encounter a single Republican. I probably shouldn't talk too loud, But what I'm going to be interested to see.
But there is great live theater in the Twin Cities.
It's a great town. And I like it here, and the people are nice, and great food, and we make a mean Juicy Lucy and a lot of wonderful things.
All that stuff. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. What I was going to say is it'll be interesting to me to see how Walz does in the rural part of the state. you had a gentleman on last night, I forget his name, who was talking about the deep blue metro and then the red, broader part of the state, which wasn't always that case. It used to be a purple state. And I have family in the rural part, family in the city, and I experienced both sides of it growing up as a kid, and it has shifted. So it'll be interesting to see how Walz approaches that, not just in this state, but all of the Midwest states. And I know Minnesota is probably not entirely unique in that regard, but I'm just not quite sure how that's going to play out. And the other thing I'll add is that he is a very, very good communicator. I think one of his best qualities is the fact that he was a high school teacher and he can make people laugh, trying to keep the attention of high school students, I suppose. But when you can make people laugh, you can go a long way in life. And he definitely has that, quality.
Yeah. Jeff, what else do you like about him, just as a person?
He doesn't get a ton of, I'll say this, like local politics, there's not a whole lot of, aha moments that come up, each and every day. And I think part of that is because there's probably not a ton of pushback, at least here in the metro.
Yeah.
Like the Star Tribune's not going to push back, or the local news isn't going to push back. So usually what you hear and see of him is just, hey, Walz did this, Walz did that. There's a lot of things I don't like, such as, the COVID policy, and we've talked about his reaction to the riots in 2020. But he seems like a very steadfast guy, kind of my way or the highway, which sometimes is kind of what you need in politics. He doesn't waffle, which I respect. I do value that, even though I don't maybe agree with the point he's trying to make. So if that helps.
Okay. You guys got any questions for Jeff?
No, I just want to say that's the most, Jeff, thank you for being on here, because that was the most Minnesota. I'm actually a Trumper, but like, here are 3 things I like about Governor Walz. So,
Minnesota nice exists for a reason. Sean.
I will say the one interesting thing that'll be Steve Kornacki, citing the media for the first time in a while, did this thing on yesterday where he looked at the analysis of voting in Minnesota vis-a-vis the last few years in Minnesota, last few cycles rather. And there's no evidence that actually Walz actually has done well with the rule vote. And I think that's going to be an interesting narrative how it plays out. They want to, I think it was Meghan McCain that put out a tweet yesterday that says, you putting on a camo hat doesn't make you good with rural voters. And it's true. I mean, I think the narrative,
shooting pheasants does, like he walks the walk, he's not.
I'm just, my point is that, look, I think we talked about this earlier with when Harris rolled out. No one knows this guy on either side, and whomever defines him first. I know they're trying to call him coach. They want to make him rule. I think there's an opportunity for both sides. I think the Trump campaign and the right is going hard at him. It'll be really interesting in a week to see where his polling numbers are.
I agree with that. Jeff, how did you learn about two-way?
I've been following you since the 2016 campaign, Mark. In my opinion, you were one of the few out there who was calling it like it was on the ground. And I just kind of valued the independent, thought analysis that you provide. So
thank you, Jeff. Come back often, not just because you're from Minnesota. Appreciate that. All right, let's bring David Bonson in. If you can start your video. There you go, David. Unmute. Go ahead.
There we are. All right.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, this issue about how progressive or moderate he is becoming frustrating, and yet I understand a lot of it is part of the spin. The paid, like people saying, I don't get why he's been called so progressive. Since when is paid family leave progressive? As if that's the issue conservatives are talking about. The most famous advocate in the country of that issue was named Ivanka Trump. I mean, obviously that's not what people are talking about. They're talking about 2020. They're talking about letting the city burn and him defending it. And that crime issue connected with COVID issues, that's the area in which the sound bites. I spent a little time yesterday trying to really dig into it. It's stunning. I mean, I think it's worse than the sound bites that are out there for Kamala. But the issue that no one's talked about, and I thought you might bring it up here this morning, Mark, and that's why I raised my hand, was his comment last night at a speech where I agree he was charismatic and whatnot. But that J.D. Vance couch joke had people who can't stand J.D. Vance defending him. defending Vance. It was disgusting. It was totally different than what everyone's told me about Tim being this likable, affable, enjoyable Midwest guy. That low ball nonsense is just going to hurt. And I saw Dispatch Never Trumpers with hundreds of thousands of followers vehemently condemning Tim last night and condemning the governor and defending Vance. And these are vehement Vance critics. And so I'm just curious if you think that there's traction there. And I'd ask the same to Sean and Tim.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think, and we won't have time to talk about it today, but I think that the elevation of Walz gives Vance an opening even before that line last night. I think it gives him a sparring partner that gives him a focus to go after on policy rather than all the stuff he's been embroiled in. I bet he never repeats that joke. I think he's probably been told it was a mistake, and I don't think you'll hear it again. And I agree, it was off message and off brand. Sean and then Tim.
Yeah, first of all, I'm really glad you brought that up. I had that on my list previously. Thank you for acknowledging it because it reaffirmed, at least I questioned it. I saw some of the same traffic you did. So thank you for injecting that in. I thought the other aspect of it that I was intrigued by was this whole notion of spreading disinformation that the left is so high on. And here you go out there with this guy who's supposed to be Minnesota nice, lying about something that is knowingly false. And this sort of undermined the narrative that they supposedly care so much about. So I agree with you. I don't think it's got resonance. I just don't think that a joke that a lot of people really didn't get in the first place because it was misinformation are going to get a ton. But I agree with you that it undermined their case at a time that was critical.
Yeah,
I mean, you're living proof of the myth of Minnesota nice. But go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm just going to say, like, if we're going to start framing conversation around decency, and if that moved people and was what entirely won elections, I think Democrats would have won in 2016. And we're also fine having that as the frame of the conversation. But Mark, to your point, I do think there is an opportunity for JD in some sense to do a reset because he has a new mission now. I don't think he like sheds all of his baggage, but it is like, all right, here's test 2. Can you pass it? And I think that's what's in front of him.
All right.
Well,
David,
this gets back
you.
just quickly. I think this gets back to this reset opportunity that I spoke at the beginning. This picking Ham gave us new energy, a new opportunity, a chance to recalibrate. Whether we take it or not will be seen. But also, look, I got to say this. I saw part of the Fox interview. I get it. It wasn't exactly completely on point. But everybody else in the ecosphere is on point right now, and that matters.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It matters, but there's only one person who actually matters truly in the end, and it's the nominee whose rambling performance yesterday, and he doesn't have another public event scheduled till Saturday, I believe, is just, leaving a lot of Republicans saying the door was opened yesterday. We're all singing, but the choir leader is talking about other stuff, including Joe Biden and other things. All right. David, thank you. Thanks everybody who participated. Sorry, all the hands up. Appreciate that. We try to keep this crisp. 6 o'clock tonight, I'll be back with my unnamed program. I hope you'll join for that. We have some good stuff planned, and we'll review the events of the day. And then again, we'll be back tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern time, same bad time, bad channel for the morning meeting. Thanks everybody for joining. Good night and good luck.